and welcome to this week's DOWNtoBIS with Ash and Jeff. This week we're taking a look inside your mind and we're going to be discussing neuromarketing.
Now I'm going to start this with a question. It takes 0.35 seconds for a typical Major League Baseball pitch to reach the batter. Now the fact is that to initiate a swing, to register visual stimuli, to coordinate hitting the ball, a batter needs at least half a second, if not more. So how does he hit the ball? Well, the answer is quite simple. He starts collecting information about the pitch before the ball leaves the pitcher's hand. How far back he leans, how he holds the ball, what cues he gave to the batter.
So if we reconcile this with the traditional model of decision making, it doesn't quite stack up. The traditional model was said there's the rational analytical side of the brain and then there's the emotional and the creative. They're considered two halves of a whole, right back from the Apollyon logical to the Dionysian feeling. Freud described it as the id versus the ego, the reptilian brain versus the frontal lobe. Plato described the brain as a carriage being drawn by two horses, one powerful but unruly, the other easy to control. But there's a breakthrough, a new way to look at these two parts of the brain that really lets us understand behaviour more easily.
Instead, latest research shows that human emotions are rooted in predictions of highly flexible brain cells. These are called somatic markers. In fact, somatic markers are patterns in circumstance. If X and Y happen, then Z will happen. What we've also found in the model, and what research has shown, is that rational and creative are actually looked after by the same part of the brain. And emotional information, the feelings that we have, are a result of these somatic markers which happen and are processed in our subconscious. There's a point of distinction here. The feelings that we have aren't really feelings. They're summaries of mathematical data and information processed subconsciously.
So why do we need somatic markers? Beyond being a rational reason to have a hug, there's two really important things. One is they're a shortcut. They allow us to process information and access it really quickly. The second thing is limited bandwidth. Without them, we just wouldn't be able to function in day-to-day life. Consider a trip to the supermarket. There's over 26,000 units in an average supermarket nowadays. How can you possibly get around and process all that information? Well, you use somatic markers in two ways. One, it allows you to access the information that you've stored over time, but secondly, your subconscious or the emotional part is constantly processing information, and these markers allow it to be stored so it can be accessed next time.
There's a case study for this. A test panel was shown equal amounts of Coke, AT&T, Ford and other advertisements. They then watched a show of American Idol, which has a lot of product integration in it. In fact, most of the product integration is Coke. AT&T just sponsors the call-in mechanic. At the end of the show, the same reel was shown to the test panel. Brain stimulation was measured, and what we found is, not surprisingly, the Coke ads created more stimulus. There was linking back to the positive product placement within the show. AT&T had a slight increase. The key here is that Ford's brain stimulation as a response to being shown in the ads decreased. This is because we only have so much room to process information, and while the brain is busy processing all the information about the product integration of Coke and AT&T, there's just no room left for Ford.
So, getting down to the implications part. Humans are unique in that we can decide when to lean on each of our two mechanisms. So circumstances can dictate which faculty is used. In situations of high importance in a business environment, when there's sufficient time or lots of quantitative information, we'll rely on the top-of-mind rational processing. However, if it's urgent, emotive, if there's many unknowns, and if we've done it sufficient times before, we will rely on the somatic markers driven by the emotional brain.
So there's two main situations that will lean on somatic markers. High pressure things where we just don't have enough time, but also low interest purchases. We just don't have enough time or enough want to think about the milk that we purchase, for example.
So we're just about out of time today, but what might be really interesting for some of you FMCG marketers or people who are in those low interest categories is how can you disrupt, address and change the somatic markers that will then alter your customers' behaviour. If you're interested in that, let us know below and we'll do a follow-up episode on this topic.
Also, for those of you that would like a little more information, here's a list of all the sources that we used to pull together this week's episode, and they're a great read. That's all, folks. Bye.